Did you even finish high school? Or are you just guessing what wine is? The words dropped like a lead weight in the center of the dining room. Silas Mercer, billionaire tech mogul and patron saint of arrogance, sat reclining in a high-backed velvet chair at the Monarch, Manhattan's most exclusive steak and cellar restaurant. His gaze was fixed coldly on Alicia Carter Young, black, and barely past her second week on the floor. She stood frozen beside the table, a bottle of red cradled in her shaking hands, the label facing out in perfect form, but it was the wrong bottle, and she knew it, just moments before. In the bustle of the wine station, she'd stepped away for only seconds. Rachel, her coworker, a tall, blonde server with a tight smile and an even tighter grudge, had quietly swapped the bottle Alicia had selected for the one now in her hands. A 2014 Lafite had become a 2015 Pauillac. The bottles were nearly identical. Nearly. By the time Alicia returned to Mercer's table, the mistake was already sealed. I believe this is Alicia began, her voice trembling. Mercer interrupted. Don't waste my time. He grabbed the glass she'd just poured, sniffed dramatically, sipped, and then grimaced like he'd tasted acid. This is a joke. It'd still be a gover. I'm sorry. Sir. There may have been a mix-up. Mistake? No, he snarled, rising slowly from his chair. This isn't a mistake. This is stupidity wearing an apron. It's a minus. Her eyes darted to the sommelier station, where Rachel stood watching. She turned quickly when Alicia caught her gaze. I'll replace it right away, Alicia said. Her hands were trembling now. It was never my. Mercer laughed cruelly, loud enough to catch the attention of the tables nearby. Of course it was your fault. Who else would screw up something this simple? This is the only thing you people ever get to do right. And even that, he cut himself off, then stepped closer. Say something useful. Or shut up. It does no guide. Alicia stood still, mortified. The red had already drained from her cheeks. She looked toward the manager's podium. Peter was too far, busy helping a guest across the room. I'm just trying to, she whispered. That was when Mercer's hand shot forward. The slap was fast, open-palmed, and vicious. It cracked against her cheek like a gunshot, the sound ringing through the restaurant. Alicia stumbled backward, hit the edge of the table behind her, and dropped to the floor. A thin line of blood traced the corner of her mouth. Gasps echoed around the room. A wine glass shattered at a nearby table, dropped from someone's stunned hand. Alicia pushed herself up, slow, dazed, her hand pressed to her cheek. Mercer stood over her. You're lucky that's all you got. NSC. He took a step forward, lifting his leg to strike again, this time. A kick. But this time, she moved. Alicia's hand shot up like lightning, catching his ankle mid-air. The power in her grip was immediate and precise, controlled but undeniable. Mercer's balance wobbled. The heel of his shoe hovered inches from her ribs. His eyes widened. You shouldn't have done that, she said, quietly. Her voice had changed. No longer trembling, no longer pleading. She twisted, with a smooth, practiced pivot. Alicia stepped into his center of gravity, rotated his ankle just slightly, and used his momentum against him. Mercer stumbled, then crashed to the floor, his body landing awkwardly on one side. Gasping. Silence. Every phone in the room was out now. Cameras recording. Mouths hung open. The air felt electric. Alicia stood over him, her nose still bleeding slightly, her hands at her sides, her breathing steady. Self-defense, she said, loud enough for every recording device to catch. She did not look to Peter, who now rushed toward her, nor to Rachel, who had disappeared. She didn't try to flee, didn't cry, didn't speak again. She simply waited, because she didn't need to prove anything else. And that's how it began. If you felt this moment in your chest, hit like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because someone near you might be watching this story too. The restaurant hadn't made a sound in over a full minute. Even the kitchen, usually a steady hum of sizzling pans and shouted orders, had gone quiet. Time, somehow, had frozen at the monarch, suspended by the image of a billionaire tech mogul lying sprawled on the floor, and a young black waitress standing over him, blood on her lip and calm in her eyes. Alicia didn't move. Her stance was neutral, hands loose by her side, shoulders relaxed, breath steady, but there was no mistaking the energy around her. She was no longer just a waitress. In that moment, she stood as something else entirely, something no one expected. Peter, the floor manager, was the first to react. He pushed through the stunned crowd, eyes darting from Mercer to Alicia, then to the guests whose phones were all held high, recording from every angle. "Alicia," he said softly, breathless as he arrived beside her. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze was still fixed on Mercer, who groaned on the ground, trying to sit up. When she finally spoke, her voice was cool. "He hit me. I defended myself. Peter looked down at Mercer and cursed under his breath. The older man's face had gone pale, and his chest rose and fell in short, uneven bursts. He wasn't seriously injured, not in the way a man might be from a real beating, but his pride, his ego, had been cracked in full view of high society. Alicia wiped the corner of her mouth. The blood had already begun to dry. "Call an ambulance," someone whispered. "And the police." Multiple people were dialing already. Mercer's guests, 2 men Alicia hadn't even looked at during the altercation, stood awkwardly nearby, their faces frozen in blank disbelief. They had made no move to stop Mercer when he slapped her, no protest when he lifted his leg, but now, they stared like they were seeing him for the first time. Peter turned to one of the servers. "Get the house first aid kit, ice packs, bandages, do my Heisada, CSS'n." Another staff member rushed off. Behind them, Rachel stood at the edge of the service corridor, half shielded by the wall, her hands clenched tightly around her apron. She said nothing. Her face was unreadable. Mercer finally sat upright, one hand on the floor, the other at his chest. His expression was confusion, then rage. "She assaulted me," he wheezed. "You all saw it. Tu badagintu." Alicia blinked. "You hit me first, and tried to kick me after. They saw that too. Thine tell Dilas." Her words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The evidence was already circulating, uploaded and shared in real time. A teenage boy at a nearby table was whispering excitedly into his phone. "Yo, I got the whole thing. Like, the slap, the kick, everything. In his O's." Peter looked around, suddenly very aware that this wasn't going to end quietly. "Let's move to the back," he told Alicia gently. She shook her head. "I'm not leaving the floor. I didn't do anything wrong." "It's 70, he sighed. "Okay, just stand by the wall. Will you? Away from him." "I would not," was no to her, and she nodded and stepped back near the bar, keeping her distance but staying visible. Her posture was straight, composed. Not a single tear had fallen. Not a single excuse had been offered. The ambulance came first. 2 EMTs rushed in with a stretcher, immediately crouching beside Mercer, who by then had milked enough of his discomfort to look as though he'd been trampled. He gave them a story through shallow gasps, something about being violently attacked, about a deranged employee, about unprovoked aggression. "I present." The EMTs nodded, but their eyes wandered. One of them had already seen the video. It had gone viral on Twitter within 30 minutes. The police arrived next, 3 officers, 2 white males and a black woman with a no-nonsense expression and a notepad already in hand. "We've seen the footage," she said after introducing herself to Peter and Alicia. "We'll need statements. But from what's out there so far, this looks like self-defense." "It's Reekley." Alicia offered her ID without being asked. "My name's Alicia Carter. I've been here 16 days. 8. The officer nodded. "Did he touch you first?" "He slapped me. Then he tried to kick me. I stopped him." Peter jumped in. "I saw the slap. And so did half the room. It doesn't it Eidingsham." The other officers were questioning Mercer, who was now on the stretcher, making weak noises of outrage between shallow breaths. "She should be arrested," he muttered. "I'll sue this place to the ground." And you're free to press charges, sir, one of the officers said coolly. But this isn't looking like an open and shut case in your favor. Outside. More people were gathering. Word had spread. Someone had tagged a local journalist on social media. And now a news van was pulling up to the valet. Lights flickered through the windows. The Monarch had become a crime scene. A media site. A courtroom of public opinion, all in under an hour. Rachel was gone. Peter would later find out she had slipped out through the employee exit during the commotion. No word. No warning. She didn't answer her phone that night, or the next. The police finished taking statements. The lead officer handed Alicia a card. If you need anything support, protection, call this number. You're not in trouble. But this is going to get loud. Oh Wells. Alicia took the card, nodded once, and returned it to her apron pocket. Before leaving, the officer turned back to her. You've trained before. It wasn't a question. Alicia hesitated, then said, a long time ago. The officer smiled faintly. Well, whoever taught you, tell them it worked. DUL too. With that, the police and paramedics left. And Mercer with them. Cameras flashed as they wheeled him out. He avoided Alicia's eyes, or perhaps he couldn't meet them. Peter approached her again. Slower this time. You sure you're okay? I'll finish my shift, she said. Her tone left no room for debate. He nodded, but softly added, you won't need to. Take the night. On me. And she gave him a quiet thank you, walked back to the locker room, and pulled off her apron. The mirror above the sink showed a drying line of red near her lip, and the faintest bruise blooming beneath her eye. She stared at it for a moment, as if meeting someone else entirely. Someone older, quieter, stronger. She didn't speak aloud. She didn't need to. Outside, the world had already started talking for her. By the time Alicia stepped out of the Monarch's back entrance, the temperature had dropped 5 degrees. A soft autumn breeze moved down West 63rd Street, pulling with it the sounds of traffic, honking horns, and the dull chatter of a city that never truly sleeps. But on this particular night, New York had stopped to look at her. Not her name, not yet, but her image, her face, in mid-strike, her hand, outstretched. Silas Mercer, frozen mid-air, ankle gripped by the wrist of a woman half his size. The clip had already made it to Reddit, then TikTok, then Twitter. The hashtags were multiplying. Number, Waitress Warrior. Number, Justice for Alicia. Number, Silas struck out. Alicia didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. The city would say what it wanted to say. She had learned long ago that silence was her first armor. She walked the 6 blocks to her apartment. It was a modest second-floor studio in Hell's Kitchen, nestled above an old laundromat with a flickering neon sign. She climbed the narrow stairs, unlocked her door, and entered a space that smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Cozy. Lived in. Safe. She placed her apron on the counter, kicked off her black flats, and headed for the bathroom. The mirror didn't lie. Her lip was still split, the bruising beginning to show along her cheekbone. She touched it gently. It stung, but it wasn't the worst pain she'd felt in her life. Not even close. In the small cabinet above the sink, she reached past the bandages and pulled out a small wooden box. Smooth and worn, the latch clicked open. Inside were 2 tightly rolled hand wraps, deep burgundy, faded from use. She hadn't unwrapped them in 3 years. She stared at them now. In the back of her mind, a voice echoed, gravelly, southern, tired. Don't fight unless you must. But if you must finish it. They was Coach Daniels, her mentor, her escape from a life that had tried, over and over, to reduce her to silence. Alicia closed the box gently. She cleaned her lip, iced her cheek, and sat down at her small kitchen table. Her phone buzzed on the counter, dancing slightly with the force of the incoming notifications. Voicemails, messages, unknown numbers. She turned it over. Screen down. She'd been invisible all her life. Now, suddenly, she was everyone's screensaver. At 10:41 p.m., The call came not from a reporter or a lawyer, but from Peter. She answered. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "I know it's late. I just wanted to check in. I'm okay." She said simply. "I figured. You're tougher than you look." She let out the smallest exhale of a laugh. "They put Mercer in Mount Sinai," he continued. "He's stable. Bruised pride. More than anything." She said nothing. "Cops said you're in the clear. Legally. Video helped a lot. So did the witnesses." Reasoned. Alicia closed her eyes. "Good. Affided. But," Peter said, his tone shifting, "press is gonna get bad. Real fast. They're circling already. I just wanted to warn you. When 25, I figured. They've been calling the Monarch all evening. I've got managers fighting over who gets to make a statement. It's gonna be a mess." "IDs. Do I still have a job?" Alicia asked. He hesitated. "Technically, yes. But off the record, I think corporate's nervous. Mercer's got lawyers. Money. Reach. They'll try to spin it." She murmured. "Probably. But there's already 1,000 clips online, and the world saw what happened." "Ian." She rubbed her temple. "If you need anything," Peter added. "A reference. A place to stay. You let me know. Okay? You handled yourself better than anyone I've ever seen. And that's coming from a guy who's worked 30 years in restaurants. Was now. Thanks. Peter." "Oh." After the call ended, Alicia sat in silence. Somewhere in the distance, a siren howled, then faded. At 11:22 p.m., her phone rang again. Blocked number. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. On the fourth attempt, she picked up. There was a pause. Then a male voice spoke, measured. Calm. "Ms. N. Carter. This is Nolan Graves. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Dodd. Silas Mercer." "Oh well." Her jaw clenched. She said nothing. "I want to make clear that I'm not calling to intimidate or accuse. I'm calling to discuss resolution." Besides, still silence. Graves continued. "My client is considering a public apology, a controlled press release, perhaps a private settlement, to avoid further media escalation." 35-2. Alicia's voice was cold steel when she finally replied. "Your client slapped me, called me garbage, tried to kick me, in a full restaurant. I haven't too. I understand that. I truly do. And I imagine you've had many calls tonight, people looking to spin this. Exploit it. Frame it. I'm not interested in any deal that involves silence." Do. There was another pause. Then, Graves said carefully, "Perhaps we'll be speaking again soon. Good night. Ms. Carter. Is not it too rather?" The line went dead. She stared at the wall. Resolution. Control. Silence. Words like veils. Words that rich men use to dress their shame in gold trim. She stood, walked to her closet, and pulled down an old duffel bag from the top shelf. Inside, gym clothes, sneakers, and a pair of worn MMA gloves. Tucked beside a folded navy sweatshirt with Hudson Women's Boxing League stitched across the chest. She hadn't needed them in years, but the world, it seemed, had a different plan now. Alicia sat back down, stared at her phone. One missed call from her sister, two from a number with a D. C. Area code. A text from Peter. "You did the right thing. Not Wade." Another from an unknown number. "You're a hero." Oh, and a comment. Screenshotted and sent by a friend. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She just ended it. She's what grace under fire looks like. Alicia turned the phone off. Tomorrow would be louder. Tonight. She let herself breathe. Silas Mercer's penthouse sat high above the city, a monument of glass and steel that pierced the New York skyline like a dagger. From the 68th floor of the Lucent Tower, he could see every inch of the city. He believed he owned every street, every bridge, every lighted window. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt small. The bruises were blooming now. Across his ribs, a purplish hue. His ankle was sore from where she'd caught it, and his ego? Shattered, crushed like a champagne flute under an uninvited guest's heel. He lay on the leather chaise in his living room, shirt unbuttoned, a glass of scotch untouched beside him. The TV was on mute, but he could still see it, his name scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Cable networks, talk shows, late-night panels. Billionaire assaults waitress, gets flattened. Work. No one mentioned his net worth, or his philanthropic work, or the hundreds of jobs he'd created. All they cared about was that clip, that moment, that girl, Alicia Carter. He hadn't even known her name until his assistant texted it to him, lifted from the police report. Now it was on every news site in America. She's gone viral, Nolan Graves had said earlier, his tone flat with concern. You've become the villain of the month, maybe the year. As Mercer had paced the room then, every step another flare of anger. I didn't hit her like some street thug. It was a reaction, reflex. She disrespected me. She was doing her job. She brought the wrong wine. To exonement, Graves had sighed. You slapped her. Silas then tried to kick her. On camera. You can't PR spin your way out of this. Silas had thrown the remote across the room. Now, hours later, the silence in the penthouse was thick, and somewhere deep in his chest, behind the ache, was a hum of something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear of jail. He had lawyers. Not fear of losing money. He had accounts in 3 countries. But fear of losing control. His narrative. His legacy. His grip on how the world should see him. He stared at the ceiling, and for a flicker of a second, saw her face. Not defiant. Not scared. Still. That was what haunted him. She had been still. Like she knew what was coming. Like she'd seen it all before. Across town, Alicia sat in the corner booth of a small cafe in the East Village, her hood up, eyes tucked behind a pair of round sunglasses. It was nearly midnight, and the place was mostly empty. Just a few NYU students studying under dim yellow lights and an old man sipping black coffee like it was his last comfort on earth. She stirred a lukewarm tea, though she didn't drink it. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She silenced it. A moment later, a familiar voice slid into the seat across from her. Told you one day you'd make the news, said Coach Daniels, with that half grin she remembered from so many years ago. He looked older now, hair grayer. Shoulders still broad but slower in movement. He wore a bomber jacket over a threadbare hoodie that said Hudson Boxing, faded at the edges. I didn't ask for it, Alicia replied quietly. I know. They got it unsove. He studied her face. The bruise. The cut. She's still in there, he murmured. The girl with the fists and the fury. I have lied, I willowed. I didn't hit him out of anger. Well, business. Didn't say you did. But it was clean. I saw the footage. You stepped in. Shifted weight. Palm to the sternum. Perfect strike. Controlled. Precise. You saved his life by ending the fight in one hit. I just wanted him to stop. He did. Mixed. She finally took a sip of the tea. Coach leaned forward. Elbows on the table. They're gonna come at you now. Money. Lawyers. Publicists. They'll offer you everything to stay quiet. Together. I'm not interested in money. 18. You should be interested in protection. Is said. Alicia looked up. You think this ends with a few tweets and cable news? Coach said. This man has a reputation, and men like him, they don't just fall, they drag others down with them. She didn't respond. I saw what you did, Coach continued. Softer now, but more importantly, I saw how you did it. That wasn't just skill, Alicia, that was restraint, that was grace. A long silence passed between them. Then she said, I wanted to hit him harder. Coach nodded slowly. But you didn't. That's why you'll be okay. Night. Outside. A car passed by with the radio on full volume, talk show hosts debating whether Mercer should resign from his board seats. A pedestrian on the sidewalk paused, looking through the cafe window. phone in hand. Alicia tilted her head away. Coach slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Safe house. Upstate. Just a cabin and a key. If you need space, it's there. No press. No noise. Just you and quiet. Revan." She hesitated, then slipped it into her jacket. "I don't want to hide," she said. "It's not hiding," he replied. "It's choosing peace." "Oh, wait." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small wooden box. She blinked. "You kept it?" "Course I did," he said. "You left it behind like you were never coming back." He placed it gently on the table. The same box she had opened earlier that night. But this one? Different. Inside, neatly folded, a photograph of her in the ring. 12 years ago. Gloves raised. Sweat on her brow. Smiling. Under it, her first pair of competition gloves. Still stained. Alicia's throat tightened. Coach rose. "You decide what kind of fight this is. Just make sure you're fighting for the right reason." She nodded. Eyes on the box. As he left, she watched him disappear down the street. Shoulders hunched. Hands buried in his coat pockets. She sat there another hour. Not hiding. Not running. Just deciding. By morning, Alicia's name was no longer just a trending topic. It was a headline. Waitress takes down billionaire in self-defense. Woman flattens tech tycoon with one strike. Who is Alicia Carter? That last one had its own hashtag. Climbing fast. Reporters were already outside the Monarch. Some had found her old boxing footage. Others were digging into her past, her high school records. Her time at Hudson Boxing League. The brief but brilliant amateur career she abandoned 6 years ago. No arrests. No scandals. Just a trail of silence. She'd never spoken to the press. She wasn't about to start now. The coffee shop she usually visited on 9th Ave had to close early. The owner, an old Puerto Rican woman named Rosa, called her directly. "Mija, don't come today," Rosa warned. "They're already sitting in your usual spot. Cameras and everything." "I will be." Alicia muttered a thank you and hung up. She stood at her window, blinds half closed, watching the city breathe below. From here, Manhattan looked the same. Cabs, buses, pedestrians in a rush to be late. But she knew better. Today, the city wasn't just awake, it was watching. She finally checked her phone. 47 missed calls. More texts than she could scroll. 3 voicemails from her sister in Atlanta, and 1 from a number with a very familiar area code. Washington. D.C. She played the voicemail on speaker. "This is Special Agent Marlon Reeves with the Department of Justice. We're looking into a pattern of workplace abuse involving Mr. Silas Mercer. Would like to speak with you when possible." "We're on." Her stomach turned. Pattern of abuse? She hadn't considered that. She thought she was the beginning. Maybe she was just the first one who didn't bow. Before she could call back, the phone rang again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Alicia Carter?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes." "Well, this is Lorraine Powell with Justice Now. We're a non-profit that supports women facing public backlash after high-profile incidents of violence or harassment, especially women of color. We're not lawyers. We're allies." Inside, Alicia remained silent. "We're not here to push you into speaking or suing," Lorraine added. "We just want you to know we've seen what they're doing, and we know how fast it can turn." "There's night. How fast what can turn?" Alicia asked finally. "The narrative. The moment. It's not about what he did, but how you reacted. You're strong, Alicia, but you shouldn't have to be strong alone." 80 dime. Alicia blinked slowly. A quiet sting settled in her chest. "I'll think about it," she replied. "You've got our number. We're not going anywhere." They hung up. She tossed the phone onto the couch and sank into the worn cushion, rubbing her temples. In the kitchen, the kettle whined. She ignored it. Instead, she opened her laptop. A quick search brought up a dozen versions of the same footage, her name attached to every keyword. Black waitress, self-defense, trained fighter, palm strike, entitled Billionaire. One video had racked up 12 million views. Alicia watched the screen with detachment. The woman in the video looked like her, moved like her, but she didn't feel like her. The woman in the clip didn't flinch, didn't cry. But Alicia remembered the exact second Mercer's palm had cracked against her face. She remembered the burn, the iron taste of blood, and the silence that followed. She closed the laptop. That afternoon, Peter called again. "They're calling corporate CO," he said, exasperated. "They want you fired." Who? "Mercer's lawyers. They say you embarrassed a valued client. There's talk of a lawsuit against the restaurant." Alicia snorted softly. "He assaulted me. In her teeth. I know. I've told them that. And I've got your back. But they're scared." Tolerated. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time you think about stepping away. At least from the monarch." Well." Alicia said nothing. "I hate this," Peter added. "But I don't want to see you dragged through months of legal threats. If I know guys like Mercer, and believe me, I've served plenty of them, they'd rather burn a building down than admit they were wrong in public." "Is numb," she sighed. "Thanks for the heads up. I do mine. I can get you severance. Quiet exit. Leave on your terms. Red, let me think about it. It's take your time. And Alicia, what you did, that was courage. The world's gonna twist it. But some of us know the truth." Deasing, 21. When the call ended, Alicia stared at her hands. Strong, steady, calloused from years of training, and yet, tired. In the back of her mind, she heard Coach's voice again. "You decide what kind of fight this is. Was it legal? Public? Cultural? Or personal?" She looked toward the duffel bag by the door, the one she hadn't touched since Coach gave it back. Inside were the gloves, her past, her proof. If they were going to turn this into a spectacle, she wouldn't be just the girl who struck back. She would be the woman who chose when and how she stood her ground. Not reactive, not afraid, purposeful. She picked up the bag, slung it over her shoulder, and left the apartment. Not hiding, not escaping, preparing. The gym hadn't changed. That was the first thing Alicia noticed as she stepped through the heavy glass doors of Hudson Women's Boxing League. The scent of leather and liniment hit her like a memory-clean sweat. Old vinyl. Dust from the mats that hadn't been replaced in years. It was a comforting kind of grit. The kind of place that didn't care about who you were on the outside. Only what you brought into the ring. The bell above the door jingled, and a few heads turned. Most didn't recognize her. They saw a woman in a plain hoodie, gym bag slung over one shoulder, sunglasses tucked into her collar, but one face lit up immediately. "Well, I'll be damned," called out Coach D. Reynolds, 62, graying buzz cut, arms still thick as tree trunks, strode across the floor in worn sneakers. She was wiping her hands with a towel, her voice as raspy and direct as ever. "Didn't think I'd see your tall self again unless I showed up in handcuffs at your funeral." "Geez," Alicia smiled faintly, still dramatic. "I see." "Oh." Dee didn't smile back, at least. Not yet. She stopped just shy of Alicia and took a long look. The bruise on her cheek, the tired eyes, the gym bag, the stillness in her shoulders. "You're not here to visit," Dee said. "You're here to find something. It's still dust. I'm here to remember," Alicia said softly. Dee finally smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was knowing. She reached for the bag. "Come on. Ring's open." Everyone. They walked past rows of bags, some swinging, some still. Two young girls, maybe 11 or 12, were throwing soft jabs under a trainer's eye. They looked up as Alicia passed. One whispered to the other. The ring was empty. The ropes were newer, redone since she'd last trained here, but everything else, the scuffed canvas, the creaky turnbuckles, the smell of hours and hours of fights lost and won was exactly the same. Alicia dropped her bag and pulled out the gloves. Not the new ones. The old ones. Worn. Laced. Cracked in the seams. She ran her fingers across the initials, still faded into the inside of the wrist tape. AC-12. Her first official pair. "You've still got rhythm?" Dee asked, tossing her a roll of hand wraps. Alicia caught them. You tell me. We'll go in. 10 minutes later, they were in the ring. Dee held pads. Alicia moved. The first punches were tentative. Testing. Left jab. Right cross. Step back. Slip. Pivot. Then came the heat. Hooks. Uppercuts. Combinations that flowed out of muscle memory, buried but not forgotten. The rhythm returned. The breath steadied. The sweat came easy. Dee grunted with each strike. There she is. Alicia didn't speak. She was in it now. The flow. The place beyond thought. Where the body knew things the mind had long since put down. When she finally stopped, her shoulders rose and fell with heavy breath. Her chest burned. Her legs ached. But it felt good. Clean. Dee dropped the pads and stepped back. You got control. Always had it. But now? Now you've got something else. Teen. What's that? Conviction. And Alicia leaned against the ropes, wiping sweat from her brow. Feels like the world's trying to make me into something I'm not. Is no. Dee raised an eyebrow. Then make sure you define it first. Is ask. Alicia looked at her. What if I don't want to be a symbol? Tough. Symbols don't ask to be made. They just are. The question is, who's writing your story? You or the men with microphones and spin doctors? Silence fell between them. Outside the ring, Alicia noticed the young girls still watching. One of them was filming. The other had her gloves in her lap. Eyes wide. You remember being that age? Dee asked. Alicia nodded. I remember watching girls who looked nothing like me throw punches like they meant it. And now they're watching you. They did. That sat heavy in her chest. Later, in the locker room, Alicia changed into dry clothes. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She let it buzz. When she finally looked, there was a text from Peter. Call me as soon as possible. Corporate's meeting about you. Mercer just made a statement. Her stomach turned. She tapped open a browser. There it was. A headline across every major outlet. Mercer apologizes for incident. Cites emotional exhaustion. The quote was worse. I reacted poorly to what I perceived as disrespect. I apologize if my actions caused distress. I've always supported women in the workplace, and I remain committed to equity and growth. Doesn't. Alicia let out a dry, bitter laugh. He still couldn't say it. Still couldn't see her. She scrolled down. Public reaction was swift. He never said her name. Perceived disrespect? She was doing her job. Where's no? He kicked her. And he's talking about equity? Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from Lorraine Powell at Justice Now. We'd like to arrange an interview. Not for ratings. For your words. In your voice. If you're ready. If not, we'll wait. Alicia didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked back to the gym floor, stood in the doorway, and watched the two young girls now practicing jabs at the bag. She remembered herself at that age, awkward, quiet, always watching, always waiting for someone to show her how not to be afraid. Coach Daniels had shown her. Dee had shown her. Now maybe it was her turn. She didn't want fame. She wanted the space to be human, but maybe, just maybe, being seen wasn't always a threat. Sometimes, it was a weapon. Silas Mercer sat in his private conference room, overlooking the Hudson River. The blinds drawn halfway to shield him from the press cameras parked across the street. The skyline behind him was brilliant in the morning light, but Silas barely noticed. His jaw was tight. His movements sharp and controlled. He hadn't slept properly in days. The room was filled with suits. His publicist, his chief legal counsel, two crisis managers, and Nolan Graves, seated at the far end of the table, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Damage control is failing, the publicist said, thumbing through a printout of trending tweets. Your statement read like a hostage note. No accountability, no emotion. They saw through it in 5 minutes. I apologized. Silas snapped. No. Graves replied. You performed an apology. That's different. Doesn't it? The others fell silent. The walls of the empire were cracking. Shareholders were calling. 2 board members had privately requested Silas step down from his CEO position. For the good of the company. The tech blogs were writing think pieces, not about his products, but about his ego. The comments were brutal. Billionaires think they're gods until someone reminds them they bleed. Damn. That man tried to kick a waitress. In public. What else don't we know? Graves placed a folder on the table. The DOJ called again. There are allegations from previous staffers. Verbal abuse. Late-night texts. Threats to destroy reputations. Your NDA agreements will only hold so long if they subpoena the right people. Very one. Silas rubbed his temples. So what? I'm just supposed to vanish? No. Graves said. But you're not going to bully your way out of this. Not this time. I was due. Silas looked around the table. All those eyes he'd paid to protect him now waiting to see how far he'd fall. They didn't say it aloud. But the truth was clear. The power he'd wielded for years, the room freezing. Decision-ending kind had shifted. With a single palm strike. It had been knocked out of his hands. Alicia watched the press conference from the tiny break room at the gym. She sat at the scratched table, sipping bottled water as Silas Mercer's face flickered across the screen of her cracked phone. The anchor summarized his apology in careful, diplomatic terms. Alicia didn't need to hear it again. She'd already memorized the cadence of deflection. Perceived disrespect, she murmured aloud. Dee stood nearby, arms folded, shaking her head. Classic rich man code for, I was challenged and didn't like it. Why won't he just admit it? Alicia asked. Because then he'd have to believe he was wrong. And some men would rather lose everything than say they're not gods. Alicia said nothing. She thought of the slap, the silence that followed, the sudden clarity in her body the way it had known, without her mind's permission, how to respond. What scared her wasn't what she had done. What scared her was how natural it had felt. Not violent, not angry. Necessary. Dee tapped her phone. You've got messages from that nonprofit again. They're asking if you'll do the interview. Alicia closed her eyes. She didn't want lights. She didn't want a microphone. But she knew this moment wouldn't last. Either she owned the story or someone else would. She opened her phone and replied, Let's talk. The interview was held 2 days later. In the back room of a small community center in Brooklyn. No stage. No glitz. Just a chair. A single camera. And a soft-spoken woman named Lorraine Powell who asked questions as if they mattered more than the answers. The room was quiet as Alicia adjusted the mic clipped to her collar. Are you ready? Lorraine asked. No. Alicia answered truthfully. But let's go. Amagded. The camera rolled. Lorraine didn't start with the restaurant. She started with childhood. With family. With Alicia's earliest memories of being invisible in rooms that weren't meant for her. My mom worked cleaning offices. She taught me how to speak softly so white people wouldn't flinch. My sister, Maria, used to whisper stay small whenever we got on the train. Everyone. Did it work? Alicia smiled. A sad curve of the lips. Only until I didn't want to be small anymore. At 7, they talked about boxing. About Coach Daniels. About quitting the sport after her sister got sick and money dried up. About working 2 jobs to pay rent. Then, finally, they talked about the monarch. When he slapped you, Lorraine asked gently. What was the first thing that went through your mind? I wasn't surprised. Alicia replied. Not really. I've seen that look before. The kind of man who thinks pain is a privilege only he can give. And when you struck back? A long pause. I didn't feel powerful, she said. I felt present. Like for the first time in that moment. I wasn't a background noise. I wasn't a body to serve or ignore. I was real. 2000. Lorraine nodded slowly. And now? Now, Alicia breathed. Now I don't get to go back to being invisible. Whether I want to or not, Eakin stated. By the end of the week, the video had reached over 18 million views. Not the slap. Not the kick. The interview. The internet called it, The Quiet Reckoning. Clips of Alicia's voice began circulating with quotes captioned in bold white letters. I didn't want to fight. But I wasn't allowed to walk away. Dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you keep. Would have the one. But with praise came backlash. Anonymous accounts posted her old boxing match footage, claiming she was dangerous and trained to kill. A news commentator sneered. If a male bouncer had done what she did, we'd be calling it assault. As a business. Another. Don't let them rewrite this. She's not Rosa Parks. She just hit a rich guy. Alicia didn't respond. She went back to the gym. She trained with Dee. She mentored the young girls who had started showing up after school. Eyes wide. Fists clumsy but full of fire. And late at night, when the gym was empty and the lights buzzed softly overhead, she wrapped her hands with care, stepped into the ring, and found a rhythm not of rage but of return. The fight wasn't over, but she had chosen her corner. Maria Carter had always been the strong one, even when Alicia was in the ring, fists up, ducking and weaving. It was Maria, quiet, determined, 6 years older, who held the family together, while Alicia trained after school. Maria worked double shifts at the clinic. When their mother passed, it was Maria who handled the bills, who read every document, signed every paper. She was the reason Alicia had any freedom to fight at all. So when Maria called from Atlanta at 7 a.m., Alicia answered on the first ring. Did you eat? Maria's voice came through like a warm blanket laced with barbed wire. Hi. Good morning, Alicia replied, rubbing her eyes. I saw the interview. You looked tired, and a little dehydrated. Alicia smirked. You always notice the worst things first. Is noted. I notice everything. That's my job. I'm your sister. Well, Alicia sat up in bed, the early light cutting across the apartment in slanted gold. I'm okay. Maria. I'm C. No, you're not. You've never liked cameras. You freeze in every birthday video we ever had. That's because you always held the cake too close to my face. I goes of courting Nez. You're deflecting, Maria said flatly. Alicia sighed. I'm trying to keep up. Oh, Maria's tone softened. I'm proud of you. You know? 1, tentrapes. A pause. Alicia swallowed. I know, she whispered. But this won't go away soon. Maria continued. You've stepped into something much bigger than Mercer. This is national now. And you've become a lit match. I didn't ask to be. It's not Billionaire. Of course not. But now you're lit. So be careful who tries to hold you. Eat us. They talked for 20 more minutes. About groceries. About the laundromat. About nothing and everything. When they hung up, Alicia felt both heavier and lighter. Family had a way of doing that. Later that morning, a white envelope arrived under her apartment door. Hand-delivered. No postage. No name on the outside. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper, engraved with subtle silver script. You are formally invited to a private mediation session with Mr. Silas Mercer and his legal team. Date, time, address, a neutral conference center in Midtown, 2 days from now. No threats, no demands, just polite pressure. She stared at the paper for a long time. She hadn't sued him, hadn't even threatened to, but still, he wanted to meet, behind closed doors, away from cameras, away from truth. She folded the letter and slipped it into her drawer. That evening, Alicia returned to the gym just as the younger girls were wrapping up. One of them, Maya, age 12, all elbows and attitude, ran up to her with a notebook. Can you sign it? Alicia blinked. What? Your name. In here, Maya said, flipping to a page filled with hand-drawn boxing gloves and bold letters. Girls who hit back. Alicia smiled slowly, took the pen, and wrote her name. Maya grinned. You're on YouTube? And the news. My mom says you're the only person who ever made a rich man shut up with one punch. Your mom's exaggerating. God. I know, Maya said proudly. You didn't even punch him. It was like ninja stuff. Wood was backing. Alicia laughed, a full, real laugh that surprised even her. Dee watched from a distance, arms crossed, a ghost of a grin on her lips. After the girls left, Dee approached. He wants to meet, doesn't he? She asked. Alicia nodded. 2 days. Mediation. It is Danstad. You going? I don't know. Eeper. Dee leaned against the ropes. Don't go alone. Where? I wasn't planning to date. Essie. You gonna take a lawyer? No. There Dee that. Dee raised an eyebrow. You sure? Alicia zipped up her duffel. I don't need someone to speak for me. Not anymore. End quote. Dee paused. Then said quietly. That room won't be about resolution. It'll be about rewriting what happened. I know. Alicia said. Dee put a hand on her shoulder. Then make sure your version's louder. With his pot up, the day of the mediation, Alicia wore no makeup, no earrings, no jewelry to polish the truth, just a clean blazer, dark jeans, and a steel focus she hadn't felt in years. Lorraine from Justice Now came with her not as legal counsel, but as moral weight, a witness. They entered the private conference room at 11:03 a.m. Mercer was already there. He stood as Alicia entered, but didn't speak. He looked smaller in person now, or maybe it was just the setting. No cameras, no curated lighting, no adoring crowd. Just 4 walls, 1 long table, and 2 people who both remembered the sound of a slap. His lawyer spoke first. This meeting is intended as a gesture of goodwill. Mr. Mercer is prepared to offer a formal apology, in writing, and a substantial private settlement in exchange for public neutrality. Worry tell. Define public neutrality, Alicia said flatly. No statements, no interviews, no further appearances on platforms that discuss the incident. 8. Alicia leaned forward. So silence. It is to that. Resolution. The lawyer corrected. Alicia turned her gaze to Silas. He met her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, he said. You did hurt me, she replied. I made a mistake. To go. No, Alicia said. You made a choice. And then you made another one. And another. We're gone, Byler. He didn't respond. I've been silent my whole life, she continued. At jobs. In rooms like this. Around men who think being heard is a privilege. Resented. She pushed the envelope back across the table. I don't want your money. I don't want your apology. I want you to know that no matter how this ends, you don't get to own the story anymore. Even Tekez. She stood. Lorraine stood with her. Mercer didn't stop her. No one did. When she stepped outside, the sun hit her face like applause. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply walked forward. The ripple became a wave. After Alicia walked out of that sterile conference room without signing anything, the silence she refused to accept was filled by voices that had waited too long to speak, and not just her own. First came the messages. Quiet. Uncertain. Scared. A line cook from a luxury hotel in Chicago wrote to her via email. He used to own the place I worked. He'd call me boy in front of guests. I walked away every time. Thank you for not walking. All. Then a former assistant from a startup in San Francisco. I signed an NDA 5 years ago, but I still have the text messages. If this goes to trial, I want to be on record. Izzy. Then came the women. Dozens. Some anonymous. Some brave enough to show their faces. One had been a housekeeper at one of Mercer's private properties. Another had been part of an internship program he sponsored. Their stories shared a pattern: quiet intimidation, entitlement laced with opportunities, and the absolute certainty that he would never face consequences. The Justice Now legal team began organizing statements. They called in a pro bono defense group with a track record of taking on high-profile abuse cases. Lorraine Powell became the point of contact for the media, not Alicia. That had been her request. I don't need to be on camera, Alicia had said. I just need this not to disappear. I did. Lorraine had nodded. Then we make sure the story grows bigger than you. Was not than the settlement, and it did. By the second week, Alicia's face was no longer the only one on the news. Headlines read, Former employees accuse Mercer of pattern of verbal abuse and intimidation. End quote. DOJ opens inquiry into workplace misconduct allegations. Ever. The strike that opened a door. Oh, Silas Mercer went dark. No press. No new statements. No interviews. Rumors spread that several board members were preparing a vote to force him out of his own company. Investors were bailing. A major retailer pulled out of a planned partnership. His face was scrubbed from the company's homepage, replaced by a vague statement about leadership transitions. And still, Alicia stayed quiet, not because she was hiding, but because she was watching. She watched Maya, the young girl at the gym, land her first clean combo without flinching. She watched her old sparring partner, Janelle, return to the ring after years away. Emboldened by what Alicia had done, she watched a line of women stretch out the door of Hudson Women's Boxing League, all asking for self-defense classes. Some were shy, some were angry. All of them were ready. And Alicia taught them, one drill at a time, one stance at a time, one truth at a time. You don't fight to win, she told them. You fight to stay whole. That Friday, Peter called again. I resigned. We're gals. Alicia sat on the fire escape, legs crossed, coffee in hand. Wait. What? The monarch? I couldn't stay after they tried to spin what happened. Said you escalated the situation by not walking away. Alicia frowned. They really said that? In a board meeting, I nearly flipped a tray of lobster bisque. Adias, she chuckled. So, what now? I'm opening my own place. Something small. Family style. Real food. No tablecloths. You want in? You offering me a job? I'm offering you a clean start. And the best damn risotto in the city. Tat deceiver. Alicia smiled into the morning light. We'll talk. Doesn't tooth. Before he hung up, Peter added, You know what you did, right? I kicked a man who deserved it? No, he said. Quieter. You showed people it's okay to stop being afraid. It said, later that day. A letter arrived at Alicia's apartment. No envelope, just a folded sheet of white paper, slipped under her door like a secret. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was precise, neat. Ms. Carter, I cannot undo what I did, and I don't expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know that for the first time in my life, I've been made to see myself not through power or applause but through the silence that followed your stillness. I will not contact you again, but I will remember. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the mediation notice. Not out of sentimentality, not out of forgiveness, out of evidence that even giants fall, that even those who believe themselves untouchable can be brought to stillness not through violence, but through truth. That night, Alicia returned to the gym late. After the last class had ended, Dee was locking up, but she tossed Alicia the key. Go on, she said. Lights stay on for you. It's producing. Alicia entered the ring alone. She didn't wear gloves. She didn't throw punches. She just moved. Footwork, breath, posture, the invisible dance that had taught her how to navigate a world designed to unbalance her. And as she circled the mat in silence, she realized something that hadn't fully hit her until now. This was not a comeback story. This was not a revenge story. This was a reminder that dignity isn't granted. It's kept, protected, defended, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, and sometimes with one open hand, and no apology. Sunday morning arrived quiet and cold, the kind of New York chill that crept through windows and settled in your bones. Alicia stood at the bus stop in Harlem, hands deep in her coat pockets, eyes locked on the street, not waiting for a bus, just waiting. Across the street stood the Harlem Public Library, not her usual spot, but the one Maria used to bring her to every Saturday when they were kids. Back then, Alicia would curl up by the biographies section, reading about women who refused to sit down, refused to bow names that sounded too big for the small. Silent girl she had been. She hadn't been back since she was 16, until today. Lorraine Powell had arranged a panel. Women, power, and silence. It wasn't Alicia's idea, but she'd agreed to come on, one condition. No speeches. She'd told Lorraine, just your story. Lorraine had replied. Inside the library's community room, 50 chairs had been set up in rows. Modest. No lights. No press. No buzz. Just people. All ages. Mostly women. A few men. Some familiar faces from the gym. Some from activist groups. A few who had traveled from out of state just to see her in person. They didn't want a celebrity. They wanted her. When Alicia stepped up to the front, the room hushed. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. She looked out at the crowd, at Maya in the second row, sitting beside her mother, at the older woman with the purple scarf, nodding slowly like she already knew what Alicia would say, at the man in the back holding his daughter's hand like a promise. And then Alicia said, "I'm not special." A pause. "I'm not brave. Not in the way people think. I just got tired of letting the world bruise me and call it normal. A longer pause. I used to think staying silent made me strong. That if I just worked harder, got smaller, stayed polite, maybe the world would give me space. It is not with Christ." She glanced toward the window, but it never did. Not until I took it. When we won, one breath, one beat. That night, at the Monarch, I didn't hit a man because I was angry. I stopped him because I've spent too many years being trained to absorb pain that wasn't mine. 18:7. Silence settled in the room like reverence. I didn't ask to become a symbol. Alicia continued. Softer now. But I won't waste the moment. Will pointed. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stood, steady and whole, letting her voice carry not as a fighter but as a witness. And for the first time, as she spoke, she didn't feel small. After the panel, people approached her quietly. Some offered hugs, others left handwritten notes. One woman, maybe in her 70s, slipped Alicia a small photo, black and white, creased at the corners. A protest line from 1964. The woman stood in the center. Younger then, fist raised high. I was called loud. She whispered. Ungrateful, disrespectful, but it was the only language they understood. I mighted. Alicia took the photo and held it like a vow. The next morning, she met with Lorraine and the legal team. DOJ's moving forward, Lorraine said. There's enough evidence for a formal investigation. Is unbeatable? Alicia nodded slowly. They're asking if you'd be willing to testify. Not just about the night at the Monarch, but the workplace culture, the pressure, the intimidation, what you saw leading up to it. Very too malady one, Alicia exhaled. She hadn't made a decision yet. It wasn't fear. It was weight. She knew what testimony would mean. More public attention, more attacks, more chances for the story to get twisted, re-edited, turned into clickbait. But she also knew what silence would cost. I'll testify, she said. But on my terms. No media circus. No theatrics. Jun. Lorraine smiled. Relieved. We'll protect you. In a resent, upgrading. I don't need protection, Alicia said. I need a microphone. Away. That night, she walked alone through Central Park. Coat zipped high. Gloves tucked into her sleeves. The world was quieter now, but not still. The headlines had shifted. Other scandals. Other stories. But Alicia hadn't faded. She'd transformed. She wasn't just the woman who brought down a billionaire. She was the one who stood up when the room told her to sit. A jogger passed by and did a double take. Are you? Alicia smiled. Yeah. You're the reason my daughter started boxing. End quote. She chuckled. She's got good taste. Ivercuzzed. The jogger grinned and ran on. Alicia kept walking. Hands in pockets. Shoulders relaxed. The city hummed around her. Unchanged. Unforgiving. But no longer in control. She crossed into the Upper West Side. Her feet knowing the way without thought. And when she reached the front steps of the small brownstone that had once belonged to her grandmother, now a women's shelter funded by anonymous donation, she paused, lit a candle, and left the photo the old woman had given her taped to the front door. Not as a monument, but as a continuum. She wasn't the beginning. She wasn't the end. She was the reminder. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood. Heavy curtains, high ceilings, and that particular chill of places where judgment hangs in the air. Alicia sat at the witness table, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a navy blazer. Simple jewelry. No makeup except for the lightest touch to soften the circles under her eyes. Not to hide them, just to prove she wasn't hiding. She wasn't alone. Lorraine sat behind her, beside her. Members of Justice now. In the gallery. Women she'd trained at the gym. Maya, Coach D, even Peter, who took the day off from restaurant planning to show up in a charcoal suit and nervous smile. And across the room, Silas Mercer, still polished, still sharp, but something about his posture had changed. He didn't lean back like he used to. He didn't command the space. His team whispered often. His eyes rarely left the floor. The trial wasn't about assault. Not directly. Mercer hadn't been charged criminally yet. This was a civil case, brought by 3 former employees. Emotional abuse, threats, discrimination, unsafe work environment, wrongful termination. Alicia had joined as a key witness. Her testimony wasn't about what he had done. It was about what the system allowed him to do over and over again. The prosecutor rose. Miss Carter, thank you for being here today. Could you tell the court what led to your interaction with Mr. Mercer on the night of January 7th? Alicia said. Her voice was even, clear. She recounted the events with precision, from the shift changes to the wine switch, from the fear in her chest when she saw him stand to the split second where she'd made the choice not to back away. But she didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She didn't need to. The slap, she said, wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination of years, of silence, of watching people like me learn to bow so we could keep our jobs, our dignity, our lives intact. It is that. The courtroom was still. Even the judge watched her a little differently after that. The defense tried to rattle her. Miss Carter, you're trained in combat, correct? Yes. I trained as an amateur boxer for 4 years. Was not of now. So, you were more than capable of harming Mr. Bed. Mercer, I was also capable of walking away. Alicia replied calmly. But no one asked why he didn't. 10, quote, the lawyer pressed. Would you describe yourself as easily provoked? No, she said. But I am no longer easy to ignore. Man it. Silas lifted his gaze at that. Briefly. Just long enough to meet her eyes. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. After she stepped down, she sat beside Lorraine, exhaling through her nose, her palms damp. You were brilliant, Lorraine whispered. I wasn't trying to be Anne. That's why it worked. Outside the courthouse. The press waited. Alicia didn't stop for interviews. She walked through the flashing bulbs and shouted questions with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove. A few reporters followed her, but she didn't answer. Instead, she paused near the sidewalk where a girl no more than 10 stood with her mother, holding a sign made of cardboard and glitter. You made room for me. 8. Alicia didn't smile. She nodded. The girl beamed. That was enough. The trial continued for weeks. Alicia didn't attend every day. But the stories piled up. Co-workers who'd been blacklisted after speaking up. Women who'd been told their careers would be ruined if they didn't stay quiet. Some had cried on the stand. Some had shaken with anger. Some had trembled through every word. And still they came. It wasn't about Silas Mercer anymore. It was about the pattern, the wound, and the refusal to let it keep bleeding. One evening, back at the gym, Alicia found Maya sitting alone after class, hands in her lap, unusually quiet. You good? Alicia asked, tossing her a water bottle. Maya hesitated. There's a boy at school. Keeps saying stuff. Rude stuff. About girls like me. Like you. Alicia knelt beside her. Do you want to hit him? She asked softly. Maya's eyes went wide. No. I mean, kinda. But, Alicia smiled. Good. That means you're already smarter than most adults. Dupin. What do I do then? You stand. Eddie. That's it? That's everything. Men. By the time closing arguments began, Alicia was no longer the focus, but she was the anchor. The story had shifted, not from pain but through power. Power reclaimed, power passed on. And when the jury deliberated, Alicia wasn't in the courtroom. She was at Hudson Gym, teaching footwork, calling out combinations, wrapping Maya's fists with soft precision, because she knew what came next wouldn't be an ending. It would be another beginning, another match, another girl learning how to stand. The verdict came on a Wednesday afternoon. Alicia was helping Coach D patch a torn speed bag when Lorraine's name lit up her phone. She hesitated before answering, hands still wrapped in canvas tape. "Tell me," she said, barely above a whisper. "They ruled in favor of the plaintiffs." Lorraine replied, voice tight with emotion. "All of them. The jury found Mercer liable on every count: wrongful termination, hostile work environment, and emotional abuse. The most denied." Alicia didn't speak, not at first. She just closed her eyes and let the silence settle in her chest. Not the hollow silence of fear or suppression, but the kind that followed truth. Like the quiet hum after a bell rings. "He's being ordered to pay compensatory and punitive damages," Lorraine added. "But the real win? The board suspended him indefinitely. They've already announced a new interim CEO. Takation's 9D, who had been listening from the other side of the gym, met Alicia's gaze and raised an eyebrow. "Well?" she asked. Alicia finally exhaled. "He lost." "Way," D snorted. "Damn right he did." 8-9. That night, Alicia didn't go out. She didn't pop champagne or join the small gathering Lorraine invited her to. Instead, she walked the streets of her neighborhood alone, scarf wrapped high, hands shoved deep into her coat. New York didn't pause for verdicts. The bodegas still blinked with fluorescent lights. The subway roared below. The air smelled of hot dog carts and faint snowfall. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. She passed by a bookstore and paused. In the window was a hand-lettered sign in red marker. "We believe black women, 18, to stated this." Below it was a display of books, memoirs, poetry, stories about resistance and rising. One had her interview quote printed on a tiny card. "Dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you keep." Alicia Carter, her throat tightened, not out of pride, but because she'd never imagined being seen could feel so quiet, so grounded. The next morning, Alicia returned to Hudson Gym early, before the girls, before Coach D, before the hum of gloves hitting bags and shouts of encouragement. She unlocked the door, flicked on the lights, and let the silence fill the room. Then she walked to the ring and stepped inside. No wraps, no gloves. She stood in the center and just listened to the echo of her own breath, to the heartbeat that had carried her through fear, shame, exhaustion, and rage, and still beat steady. She remembered every room she'd ever entered where someone tried to make her small, every job where her name had been forgotten, every time she'd been told to smile more, speak less, shrink herself just to fit into someone else's version of acceptable. She remembered the slap, and the second after it, when her body said, "No more." She touched the top rope lightly, then ducked through and stepped out again. She had more to do. Over the next week, Alicia received more than 400 messages, emails, handwritten letters, voice notes, from survivors, from young girls, from grandmothers, from white women who admitted they'd once looked away, from men who said their daughters were watching, each one a thread in a tapestry she hadn't meant to weave, but now couldn't ignore. Peter's restaurant opened quietly on a Thursday. Alicia helped bus tables that night. No spotlight, no press, just warmth, laughter, and the smell of rosemary chicken that reminded her of her mother. Midway through service, Peter came up behind her and asked, "You ever think about writing a book?" Alicia blinked. "What?" "Your story. You've got one. People want to hear it." "It front ninth," she shrugged. "I don't know. I'm not really a memoir type." "And then don't write a memoir," he said. "Write a manual, for the ones coming next." The idea sat with her for weeks. She jotted down notes on receipts, in the margins of old notebooks, even on the backs of takeout menus. She didn't write it as a hero. She wrote it as someone who had survived, who had stayed on her feet when the world wanted her to fall. The working title was simple: Stand. Oh, not fight. Oh, not rise. Oh, just stand. Because sometimes, the most radical thing a woman can do is exist fully, without apology. On a warm Saturday in early spring, Alicia hosted a self-defense workshop at the community center where she once spoke. This time, there were over 100 women. A few reporters came, but they weren't the focus. Maya was there, faster on her feet now, more confident in her jab. So was the woman from the library panel with the protest photo. She brought her granddaughter, a shy teenager who flinched when others moved too close. Alicia taught them footwork, breath, posture. But more than that, she taught them how to stand. You don't have to fight, she told them, but you do have to decide who you are, what you'll take, what you won't. Working. She looked around the room, her voice steady. And when someone tries to shrink you, remember you have the right to stay your size. It's no applause, just nods, tears, stillness, power. The sun was setting over Brooklyn, casting amber light across the rooftops. Alicia sat on the back stoop of her building, a bowl of leftover stew in her lap. Her fingers curled around the warm ceramic. It was quiet, except for the occasional rumble of the train in the distance and the muffled laughter from the neighbors 2 doors down. She liked this time of day, not because it was peaceful, but because it was honest. Shadows long, light fading, everything stripped down to its softest truth. Inside, her phone buzzed. Again. Lorraine. Peter. A book agent. A journalist from The Atlantic. A documentary filmmaker. An invite to a women's rights gala. An invite to a televised roundtable. An invite to the White House. Alicia didn't answer any of them. She'd promised herself, no decisions until after the first thaw. No more jumping from fire to fire. Just stillness. Breath. Truth. Still. Her thoughts pulled her back to everything that had changed. Silas Mercer had officially resigned, not just from his company, but from the boards he sat on. The foundation he funded had been restructured under new leadership. Investigations into past misconduct were ongoing, but his name had become more whisper than roar. He had vanished from public life. And Alicia? She had become a fixture of it, not by choice, but by truth. She was on shirts now, on murals, in student essays and protest signs, but every time someone said hero, she felt a quiet recoil. I'm not your symbol, she'd said once to Lorraine. Lorraine had smiled. You don't get to choose that part. You only get to choose what you do with it. To be. One evening, as she closed up the gym, Dee tossed her a faded envelope. What's this? Alicia asked. Found it in the old locker bin. Had your name on it. Looks like it's been sitting a while. I.T. Diaz. Alicia turned the envelope over. No stamp. Just her name in a careful script. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten on thick cream paper. Alicia, you don't know me, but I was there. The night at the Monarch. I was one of the servers. I watched it happen, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place, that you were strong enough, that someone else would speak. I've told myself that lie before. I'm tired of it. After that night, I quit. I applied to join a legal aid group in Newark. I help women now, especially women who've been told their truth is too loud. You made me remember who I was supposed to be. Thank you. No need to reply. Just keep standing, so we know how. Jay. Alicia folded the letter slowly, her heart tight. It wasn't the first of its kind, but it reminded her. This thing. She started this fire. It had hands now, legs, voice. It no longer needed her to feed it. It was moving on its own. Weeks later, Alicia stood on stage at a community fundraiser, microphone in hand. She hadn't planned to speak. She was just there to support Maya, who had won a local writing award for her essay, What Power Looks Like. Well, but the crowd asked her to say a few words, so she did. I used to think survival was about keeping quiet, she said, but I've learned something else. She paused, letting her voice rest in the hush. Survival isn't just breathing. It's claiming air that was always yours. And sometimes, survival turns into something louder, something stronger. It becomes a map for others. I feel him. She looked at Maya, sitting in the front row, eyes wide and shining. And when you're lucky, Alicia said, that map leads you home, to yourself. It's another Pete day. That night, Alicia walked home alone, the city alive around her, not against her. With her, a young woman stopped her on the corner of 8th and Fulton, nervous, smiling. She couldn't have been more than 20. I just wanted to say, what you did, what you are doing, it changed how I see myself. Is sentiment. Alicia didn't reply with a quote or a speech. She just reached out, took the young woman's hand gently, and said, you already had it in you. Dialena. Then she walked on, shoulders back, head high, not running, not chasing, just standing. Alicia sat at her kitchen table with the manuscript spread out before her, pages upon pages of ink and memory. The first draft of Stand had taken shape in stolen hours between gym classes, late-night subway rides, and long walks through Central Park where she whispered paragraphs into her phone's voice recorder. Now, in the hush of a Saturday morning, she read it aloud for the first time. Each chapter was a mirror, not just of her experience, but of 1,000 others. She didn't write in perfect arcs or polished quotes. She wrote in fragments, in breaths, in trembles. She wrote the way people survive, not clean, not convenient, but honest. Near the end of the manuscript, she paused. There it was, the line that stopped her cold. Courage isn't born in a roar. It's found in a whisper you refuse to ignore. Art. A shiver moved down her spine. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was theirs. A week later, she met with her potential publisher, Claire, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her hair and a no-nonsense voice that reminded Alicia of Maria. This is more than a memoir, Claire said, flipping through the pages. This is a call to arms, a survival guide. It's like Audre Lorde meets a boxing manual. Yes, I don't want to be a voice for everyone, Alicia said. Just a mirror, a flashlight. We gotta wanna the, Claire nodded. Then that's what we'll sell it as. I got it. She closed the manuscript and looked Alicia dead in the eye. And when the book tour comes, because it will, you set your terms. You say what's off limits. You protect the pieces of yourself that don't need to be public. Ice. Alicia exhaled. I just want to write it right. Davia. You already did. It is Exodo. Spring bled into summer. The gym expanded. A grant came through from a private foundation, anonymous. Though Dee had a hunch it was a certain ex-board member trying to make amends without making headlines. They hired a part-time trauma counselor, started a monthly story circle where women could speak without interruption. Alicia often just listened, a silent force in the corner, hands wrapped in tape, presence alone enough to hold space. Maya's jabs had grown cleaner, sharper. She was training to enter her first amateur tournament. She's got your fire, Dee said one afternoon. She's got her own, Alicia replied. And that was true. The night before the book went to print, Alicia received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 1981, a small piece about a forgotten protest in Alabama, led by a group of black domestic workers who had organized a strike after years of abuse and withheld wages. Scrawled across the bottom in blue ink, "You're not the first. You're not the last. But you were right on time." She stared at the yellowed article, the grainy faces, the headlines that never made national news. These women weren't hashtags. They weren't famous, but they were foundations. Alicia folded the letter slowly and placed it beside her manuscript. Then she lit a candle not for ceremony, but for continuity. Some fires are worth tending forever. On launch day, the bookstore was packed. Not a chain store, a black-owned indie shop in Crown Heights, where Alicia had bought her first Toni Morrison novel. The line curled around the block. Inside, Alicia signed copies in silence for the first hour, her hand moving steadily, eyes meeting each reader's gaze with a quiet intimacy. Some cried, some shook, some said nothing and just squeezed her hand. Then came a young man, mid-30s, soft-spoken, wearing a work uniform with a name tag, Marvin. "I never thought I'd read a book written by someone who looked like my sister," he said. "But it was more than that. You reminded me it's not weak to be scared. It's weak to pretend you're not." Was not a found. Alicia didn't reply with a quote. She just said, "That's the bravest thing I've heard all day." Later, after the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Alicia stayed behind with the shop owner, sipping tea from a chipped mug. "You ready for this next chapter?" the woman asked. Alicia tilted her head. "You mean the press? The panels? The people waiting to poke holes in my story?" "No." The woman smiled. "I mean the part where you live." "Oh." Alicia blinked. Then she smiled too. Soft, real, rooted. "I think," she said. "I'm finally ready for that." That night, she walked home under a sky thick with stars, rare and quiet above the city noise. For the first time in a long while, she didn't carry a bag. No notes, no phone, just her steps, steady on the pavement, and the certainty that nothing stolen from her had gone unreclaimed. At a stoplight, she paused. A little girl across the street stared at her, wide-eyed, clinging to her mother's hand. Alicia gave her a nod, and the girl lifted her chin, not in imitation, but in recognition. It had been nearly a year since the night at the Monarch. 12 months of shifting tides of headlines, hashtags, hearings, and healing. And Alicia Carter had done the impossible. She'd survived the storm without letting it harden her. She still lived in the same apartment, still taught classes at Hudson Gym, still took her coffee black and her mornings slow. But everything around her had changed. The city didn't look at her the same way. Strangers stopped her more often, not to praise but to confide. "You said something I've felt my whole life," they'd tell her. Or, "I didn't know how much I'd swallowed until you spit it out." It wasn't hero worship. It was kinship, shared ache, shared reckoning, and Alicia carried it with reverence, not as a burden, as a bond. One Thursday morning, as Alicia laced her sneakers for her usual run, her phone rang. The number was local, but unrecognized. "Hello? Ms. Carter?" A male voice. Older, cautious. "My name is Charles Levinson. I'm with the city's Office of Civil Rights. It have season sitting." Alicia straightened. "Yes? We're organizing a panel. A policy review board. We're inviting community voices to sit in. Advise on legislation, workplace protections, accountability procedures, the things your case has brought to light." "A tutor. You want me to consult?" "We want you to help build." And Alicia hesitated. She wasn't a lawyer, not a politician, just a woman who refused to stay quiet. But maybe that was enough. "I'll come," she said, "but I don't sit quietly in rooms that ignore people like me." Clyde. Levinson chuckled. "That's exactly why we're calling you." That afternoon, Alicia stopped by the gym to check on Maya's sparring session. The kid was growing into herself, taller, sharper, more deliberate. Her footwork had improved. Her eyes were focused. "Keep your left tight," Alicia called out from the corner. "You drop it when you pivot." CO. Maya adjusted mid-step, landed a clean jab, then grinned. "She's ready," Dee said from beside Alicia. "We're signing her up for regionals." "I'm seated. She's more than ready," Alicia said, arms folded, pride warming her chest. "She's hungry." "Agzo," Dee looked at her. "And you? You ready for the next fight?" Alicia smiled softly. "Always. We have good be graded and..." But she wasn't thinking of a ring. She was thinking of rooms where laws were written, of boardrooms where silence still passed for leadership, of women who whispered truths into the dark, praying someone would hear them. She would be their echo, their amplifier, their reminder that justice wasn't a courtroom outcome, it was a lifestyle. That weekend, Alicia visited her mother's grave. The cemetery was quiet. The wind, soft through the trees. She brought flowers, white tulips, her mother's favorite, knelt by the stone. Let the silence speak first. I finally wrote something, she said aloud. And people read it. People felt it. Okay. She paused, then added, and I didn't disappear. I do that. She touched the name engraved in stone. I think you'd be proud. Not because I stood up to a man, but because I remembered who I was before he tried to knock me down. Oh, a breeze passed over her shoulder. Gentle. Almost like a hand. She closed her eyes and smiled. Later that evening, Alicia received a text from Lorraine. Big news. Call me. She did. There's talk of a national speaking tour, Lorraine said. Colleges, advocacy groups, women's prisons. You'd reach thousands. Why? Alicia leaned back on her couch, staring at the ceiling. You think it's too much? She asked. I think it's needed. You know, Zay, Alicia thought of all the places where her story had already traveled without her. Now, maybe, she'd go too. Not to bask in applause, but to witness, to listen, to stand where someone else needed permission to stop shrinking. She agreed to the tour, but with conditions. No glamour, no red carpets, no sensational titles, just truth, just space. The first stop was a women's re-entry program in Baltimore. The room was small, crowded with folding chairs and a rusted radiator clanking in the corner. The women wore stories on their faces, wrinkles from worry, tattoos that masked pain, eyes that didn't flinch. Alicia stood before them. No podium, no microphone, just her voice. I'm not here because I'm better, she began. I'm here because someone gave me a moment to remember I was enough. With the Snarry, she told them about the monarch, about her fear, about her anger, about the stillness that followed when the world expected her to collapse. And when she finished, one of the women, middle-aged, sharp-voiced, with arms crossed, said, You really think that matters in here? Alicia didn't pause. Yes, because you've already survived the worst. That means you're already standing. You just forgot. Oh, the woman stared at her for a long time, then nodded. Once. That was enough. By the time Alicia got back to New York that night, her inbox was full again. More invites, more letters, but one message stood out. From Rachel, the server who'd swapped the wine bottle that night. Her message was brief. I lied. I was scared. I thought if I spoke up, I'd be next. I'm sorry. If you never reply, I understand, but I needed you to know. 2. Alicia stared at the screen, then deleted the message, not out of bitterness, but because she had already forgiven her. Not to free Rachel, but to free herself, because the only thing heavier than silence was carrying someone else's guilt. The night before Alicia left for her second tour stop, a university panel on systemic injustice in Chicago, she stood on her apartment balcony, watching the city blink to life beneath her. Taxis crawled along the avenues. Couples laughed in late-night cafes. And somewhere in the distance, the faint pulse of music rose from a rooftop party. She wasn't part of it, but she didn't feel alone. Inside, her suitcase sat packed neat, simple, with 2 outfits, her boxing wraps, a worn paperback of James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and a single photograph, a shot of her and Maya, fists up, smiling like they'd just knocked the world sideways. She thought of the road ahead, the cities, the stages, the wait, and then she whispered aloud, Let it matter. Read. Not to make her famous, but to make someone feel less alone. Chicago was colder than she remembered. The auditorium was modern, sleek, with tall glass windows and 1,000 uncomfortable seats. Alicia stood backstage beside a row of grad students and professors. Everyone was polite, stiff, scanning their notes. She carried none. She never did. The moderator introduced her last, Alicia Carter, author of Stand, community advocate, and former restaurant worker whose story sparked a national conversation about power, race, and silence. Equal. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was respectful, attentive. She walked to the podium, took a breath, and looked out at the audience. Students in hoodies, teachers with notebooks, older attendees, alumni, maybe leaning forward like they already knew the story but wanted to feel it again. She began, "I was taught to be grateful for what I was given. A job, a chance, a paycheck, even if it came with disrespect, even if it came with bruises you couldn't see. Is know this." Her voice was even, her cadence steady. "But gratitude is not the same as submission, and silence is not the same as peace. It's died." She paused, let the words settle, then continued, "I didn't ask to be the center of a storm. I asked to be seen. That night, when he raised his hand, I didn't flinch because I was strong. I didn't flinch because I was ready. Years of ignoring microaggressions, of smiling through insults, of being told I was too much, that was my training. IDS'd, laughter, soft, bitter, knowing. Self-defense wasn't a choice. It was the last language I had left. It's applause. Not wild, but firm, solid, like fists hitting canvas. She stepped back from the mic and sat down. The next speaker, a sociology professor, thanked her, then launched into a well-researched presentation on labor exploitation. Alicia listened, took notes, nodded when she agreed. She didn't need to dominate the stage. She just needed to be in the room. After the panel, a young woman approached her, pale skin, red scarf, nervous energy. "I'm in grad school," she said, "studying workplace harassment policy. But your talk, it reminded me why I started. My mom cleaned offices her whole life. People never looked at her. Not really. We're cleated." Alicia smiled gently. "Then make them." "Eight." The girl blinked. "Make them? Look. Listen. Remember. It's soons." The girl nodded, wiping her eyes. "Also," Alicia added, "write down your mother's name. Speak it in every room they try to forget her." 82 cases. The girl opened her notebook, wrote in capital letters, "Lorna Hayes." Back in New York, things didn't slow down. Hudson Gym was booming, Dee was training 3 new coaches, and Maya had won her regional fight in a split decision that left everyone screaming. Alicia had missed it. But Maya texted her a selfie from the ring. Nose bloodied. Smile wide. "I stood like you taught me." With Tegnaing Graz, Alicia replied, "You stood like yourself." "Those, Dad." That Sunday, Alicia met Lorraine at a cafe to review another round of press requests. Lorraine wore her usual sharp blazer, but her tone was softer than usual. "There's something else," she said, sliding over an envelope. Alicia opened it. Inside, an official nomination letter from the Women's Rights Hall of Voices, an annual ceremony recognizing grassroots changemakers. "You're being honored," Lorraine said. "They want you to speak." "In minest." Alicia blinked. "I don't need an award." I know." Lorraine smiled. "But someone else might need to see you get one." Add. Alicia looked at the letter again, and thought of every girl watching, every woman listening, every worker biting her tongue so she could keep her paycheck. "Then I'll speak." We're Croston. The ceremony was held in D.C., in a modest hall lined with portraits of women who had bent history. No red carpet, no limos, just candles, families, truth. Alicia didn't bring a date. She wore a simple black dress, low heels, and around her wrist, one of Maya's boxing wraps, braided into a bracelet. When they called her name, she walked up slow, steady, still standing. Her speech was short. "I'm not here because I was loud. I'm here because I stopped lowering my voice. I stopped translating my pain into something others could digest. I let it be bitter. I let it be sharp. I let it be mine. To this." She looked out at the audience, at faces young and old, tired and lit up. "If you hear my story and think it's rare, you're wrong. The only thing rare is that someone listened." One dot is it. Applause. Rising. Sustained. Not for Alicia, but for every woman she had ever stood beside, seen or unseen. Rain tapped lightly on the windows of Hudson Gym. Inside, the space buzzed with quiet focus gloves thudding against bags, shoes squeaking against the floor, breath rising and falling in rhythm. It was a Tuesday evening like any other, but Alicia felt the shift. Not in the air, but in herself. There had been no press events that week. No interviews. No speaking tours. Just the gym. Just her. Just the work she loved, the sweat. The correction. The transformation. She watched Maya spar with a newer student. Her form fluid. Her timing precise. Alicia didn't need to say much anymore. The girl had learned to listen to her body. Not just her coach. "You proud of her?" Dee asked, appearing beside her with a towel draped around her neck. "Proud doesn't cover it," Alicia said. "She's becoming everyone." "Like you?" Alicia turned, smiling. "Like herself. That's the point." 19 Stefford. Dee grinned and walked off, but not before tossing Alicia a water bottle. "You always say the right thing," she muttered, half teasing. Alicia caught it, then paused, eyes lingering on the far wall of the gym. The mural Maya and a local artist had finished last week. It showed a black woman, tall and grounded, her hands wrapped, her mouth slightly open, not screaming, not smiling, just speaking. Around her floated words, not soft, not silent, still standing. Eken, no signature, just a presence. It didn't need to be Alicia. It could be anyone. That was the point. The next day, Alicia got an email from the monarch. Yes, that monarch. It had been nearly 15 months since the night her world cracked open in that dining room. The new management team wanted to meet. Not to make peace, that wasn't the language they used, but to seek guidance. Alicia stared at the message for a long time. She didn't owe them anything. But maybe it wasn't about them. Maybe it was about proximity. Standing close enough to the fire to understand how to rebuild the foundation, not just smother the flames. She replied, "I'll meet, but not alone." With coming Dallas, she brought Lorraine. She brought Peter. She brought Nia, one of the new servers from a sister restaurant who had started a workers' union after Alicia's case. The monarch's lobby was as gold-trimmed and polished as ever. But Alicia no longer shrank in its glow. The meeting room was full of polished people with polished words. "We're restructuring. No day. We want to rebuild our reputation. We get to as Dovenit. We believe your voice could help shape a better culture." Alicia listened, then spoke. "I don't want your thanks. I want your guarantees. I want policies, not platitudes. I want the next woman who walks in here with her chin high to be protected by systems, not spotlights." There was silence. And then someone asked, cautiously, "Would you consider joining our advisory board?" Alicia raised an eyebrow. "As long as I'm not the only woman of color in the room, I wear jadas." They nodded. She stood, meeting over. That evening, Alicia met Lorraine and Peter for drinks at a tiny jazz bar tucked behind a bookstore in the village. Vinyls crackled in the background, and the lighting was so dim it made every moment feel secret. "To the monarch?" Peter asked, raising a glass. Alicia clinked her glass lightly against his. "To what used to be the monarch, was not." Lorraine leaned in, grinning. "You know what I realized today? You're not just someone who fought back. You're someone who created space for other people to show up." Alicia laughed. "I didn't mean to start a movement. I was due on it. That's the best kind," Lorraine said. "The kind built on truth, not branding." Together, they sat in companionable silence, letting the music swirl around them. At one point, a trumpet solo dipped into a minor key, and Alicia closed her eyes. She didn't need to be anywhere else. Not chasing, not proving. Just present, just rooted. Later that week, Alicia returned to her mother's old neighborhood in Newark. She hadn't been back in years. The row houses had fresh paint. The corner store still stood. A mural of James Baldwin covered one wall now, with a quote she loved. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." She stood before it for a long time, then walked the familiar path to the old brownstone her mother had cleaned every Saturday. The new owner, a young woman named Carla, invited her in when Alicia explained who she was. "My mother used to bring me here while she scrubbed the kitchen," Alicia said, looking at the tiled floor. She told me the stories in the grout. I waste. Carla smiled. Would you want to see the kitchen? She did. And standing there, in the same room where she'd once been told to stay quiet, Alicia whispered, still standing. Is Wilda, as she left. Carla called out. You ever think about running for office? Alicia turned, laughing. Only if I can do it in sneakers. I won. Carla grinned. Then you've already got my vote. Oh. Alicia walked away smiling. The city behind her. The road ahead open. The auditorium was filled to the brim. Folding chairs stretched wall to wall, spilling into the aisles, the foyer, and even the hallway outside. There was no red carpet. No formal stage, just a wooden platform, barely elevated off the gym floor, where a single mic stood, waiting. It was Hudson Gym's first annual Voices of Resilience event. Alicia hadn't planned it. Maya had. You always say we stand better when we stand together, Maya told her weeks before. So let's give others a mic, too. It is describe. Now here they were, young girls, community leaders, teachers, janitors, survivors taking turns telling their stories. One by one, with shaking hands and steady courage, Alicia stood near the back, arms folded, watching it unfold. This was what it had always been about. Not the headlines, not the verdicts, not the fame, but this. A room full of people who no longer whispered when they could speak. When Maya finished reading her own piece, a fiery declaration about reclaiming power from silence, the room erupted, not in wild applause, but in a collective rising. Like everyone's spine straightened at once, she stepped down, eyes shining, and hugged Alicia tight. Your turn, Maya whispered. Alicia blinked. I wasn't going to speak. With onsies, Maya pulled back. That's exactly why you should. The crowd was still on their feet, cheering Maya. When Alicia walked slowly to the mic, she didn't need notes. She never had. The room grew still. And then, she began. When I was younger, I thought strength meant taking a hit and not flinching. That dignity meant not letting people see you break. That survival meant silence. She looked out across the room, faces of every shade, every age. I don't believe that anymore. I believe strength is standing up even when your legs shake. I believe dignity is not something others can give you or take. And survival? Survival is the soil where transformation grows. Actoritam, a soft murmur moved through the room, like wind through tall grass. I was knocked down, she continued, by a man, by a system, by silence, but I got up not to fight back, but to stand up for others still on the ground. If you won, her voice never rose. It didn't have to. I'm not a hero. I'm not a symbol. I'm a woman who said enough. And I promise you this when you say it. When you finally say enough, your world may crack, but it will also open. At a pause. Then, and what walks through that crack might just be your truest self. I weigh. No one moved. No one clapped. They just stood still, breathing, full, and Alicia stepped back. That night, after the chairs were folded and the lights turned off, Alicia stayed behind with Maya to sweep the floors. The gym smelled like sweat, perfume, and something ancient, something sacred. I think I'm going to apply to that scholarship, Maya said, brushing dust into a pile. The one in Atlanta? Alicia asked. Maya nodded. They've got a women's advocacy program. And boxing, too. Well deceived, Alicia grinned. They won't know what hit them. Then, day progist. Maya looked at her. You think I'm ready? No, Alicia said. I think you're exactly on time. With mind free. A few weeks later, Alicia visited the Monarch again. Not to advise, not to relive, but to witness a new hiring orientation led by women of color. She sat quietly in the back. No one pointed her out. No one thanked her.